Leland Vittert is an American. All caps right now.
All caps with an exclamation point. To your point, Cuomo, it seems like there's a lot of people, dare I say Democrats, who are rooting for a recession.
Yes. Why? We know why. The best way to win is to make the other side lose. And we are addicted to grievance and which side is worse. And it's hard to be an optimist these days. But
well, that's
it's
why we have you.
Best for us.
Yeah,
Listen,
that's why
it's all I got left. You see those pictures of me from 2019 when I interviewed that air traffic controller? I look like you. Now look at me. I'm like the after picture.
The after picture, 5 years later. I would go one more with you, though, and that is that if the other side loses, you don't have to have good ideas. You don't have to be for anything.
That's exactly right. Opposition is a legit position. Vote for me. I'll stop Leland. It's like
you know, and everybody can do that with the remote controls right now. We invite you not to. Be better than the divisive politics and TV viewership we have right now. Stay with us. Cuomo, good to see you. As always, in this business, you watch an awful lot of TV. And today, you would think, watching TV, doesn't matter what channel, that planes were ready to crash into each other at any moment. It was imminent. And we are going to hear about flight delays and cancellations and air traffic control problems all summer long, not just at Newark, all over the country. Wait for it. Air travel is just like prices, crime, the border, tariffs. It affects everyone. The problems with airlines and the FAA are not new. But now Democrats and their friends in the media can blame Donald Trump for them. That's our Why It Matters segment tonight. Back when I learned to fly in the early 1990s, picture included, air traffic controllers complained about out-of-date systems. They said they were using floppy disks and World War II technology. And nothing has changed since the early 1990s. They still use floppy disks and World War II technology. This is not a new story. But suddenly, on television, newspapers, social media, it is a huge story. The anti-Trump Drudge Report gleefully published scary-sounding headlines about air travel. It's not safe. Panic amid radar radio outage. Panic is never a good thing when it comes to aviation. United pulls flights. United was actually trying to be safe. Newark Airport national embarrassment. Well, there may be some truth to that. But this goes way beyond Newark. It all stems from an incident a couple of days ago where air traffic controllers lost communications with pilots for about 90 seconds.
We lost our radar and it's not working correctly. We don't have a radar, so I don't know where you are.
This is a serious issue because I have one more arrival and now I have nobody else coming inbound.
It is scary, but not horribly unusual. Systems go down. This isn't a once-in-a-decade issue. There are backups, and there are more backups. Life goes on. There were no close calls because of the system outage. Everybody landed safely. Everybody took off. So today at 4:30, CNN went absolutely crazy over what they call a ground delay at Newark. That means planes waiting to take off to fly to Newark sat on the runway for a few extra minutes. And it is now a developing story on CNN. You can see it there. Newark ground delays are like summer thunderstorms. You can actually set your clock by them. You can imagine banners and topic bars, that's the little thing right there on the screen, saying, awaiting plane crash. No, the producers don't hope people die in such crashes, but they love the narrative that we are all unsafe, panic can ensue. And they love that, especially if they can blame Donald Trump's screwing up the FAA, or at least not fixing the FAA. The White House knows this is a huge problem. That's why Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy is in front of the cameras more than some TV anchors now.
We've known this problem has existed. There's been multiple GAO reports over the last 4 years saying you have real problems with air traffic control.
This system is 25, 30 years old. We use floppy disks. We use copper wires. Our airspace is safe because if there are issues, we don't fly. And that's why we can confidently say this is the safest mode of travel.
We didn't hear all that much about air traffic control problems during the Biden administration. Back during former President Joe Biden's time in office, we here on the program regularly talked about disorder. Americans felt things were out of control. They weren't working. Prices, crime, the border. But Trump now faces the Biden problem of disorder, and the media loves it. This summer, they will point to air travel as crazy, dangerous, one moment from disaster. In fact, they already did today. Yet flying on a plane is almost safer than doing what you are doing right now, which is likely sitting on your couch at home. Over 2,500 Americans die in house fires every year. Fatal aviation crashes in the United States last year, 179. Although the NTSB doesn't clarify whether those crashes involve commercial jets, I will tell you they did not. There were no major airline crashes last year. 2,500 people died from house fires. Those stats don't seem to make it into the fear-mongering stories about the dangers of flying in Trump's America. Maybe they should. It would be fair, after all. So we now welcome you officially in May to the summer of air traffic control meltdown. It's going to be the same as any other summer. There's delays, there's thunderstorms, there's ground stops, there's ground holds. It happens. But this time, Democrats will be able to blame Donald Trump. We begin tonight with Congressman Leland Boebert, Republican from Colorado. It's nice to see you, ma'am. Thank you. Welcome back to the program. I think we can all agree that the air traffic control system in America is completely broken. It is totally antiquated, and it goes way beyond Newark Airport. Fair?
Absolutely, Leland. And also, you mentioned that you were learning to fly in the 90s, and I've flown a small single-engine plane myself and have dealt personally with air traffic control, and certainly there have always been issues. And there are even non-towered airports throughout our country as well where pilots get in and out safely, and there are those backup systems. I do believe that the system needs updated, but this is not a Trump administration problem overall. President Trump has been in office about 15 weeks. What we just went through for 4 years was really a lot of neglect. And Joe Biden was not as present as we see President Trump. President Trump has done more in 15 weeks than Joe Biden did in 4 years. And certainly the problems that we saw in air traffic control and beyond in the FAA industry is really a lot of those DEI hires that took maybe more qualified people off of that list. And right now they are understaffed, and no cuts have been made under this administration. So there needs to be improvement in the equipment, and we need to have retraining and more hires.
Agreed on all points. You said in January of 2023, harsh words for Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. The FAA had a system outage that led to 6,100 delayed flights, 1,000 cancellations. You said every plane in America is currently grounded due to a system error. Mayor Pete, bravo. This is what happens when you hire clueless liberals for jobs they aren't qualified to do. Why didn't Donald Trump fix the air traffic control system in the first term of his time as president?
I don't think we saw as many problems, and I could be corrected on that. During his first term as president, we certainly saw them increase when the woke hiring policies were implemented under the Biden administration. And it was not a 90-second ground stop that we saw at one airport. This was nationwide. This was much more significant than 90 seconds. And I'm so grateful that everyone was safe and there were not any near misses. But certainly, this is something that needs to be addressed. And I have full confidence in President Trump and Secretary Duffy to handle this.
Okay, so there was a huge issue during the first Trump administration of trying to bring about NextGen, which was a new air traffic control system. And President Trump put it on the back burner, and it never got implemented. You don't worry that continuing to blame the Biden administration just is an invitation for everyone to then blame Donald Trump during the first term?
Did the Biden administration bring on NextGen? Did he bring that on and fix the air traffic control? Did Mayor Pete do anything to actually fix these systems?
So it's everybody's fault.
No, they actually replaced. There's a lot of folks that this is the federal government of the United States. Are you kidding me? We're not going to pretend that this is run like a great business. However, the American people did hire a businessman, and I believe that President Trump is going to implement policies that are going to get this corrected and get it corrected swiftly. That's why you've seen his agenda
fair enough. Hold on.
So aggressively.
Fair enough. President Donald J. Trump's principles for reforming the U.S. air traffic control system. According to him, the United States air traffic control system is one of the most important and vibrant elements of our nation's infrastructure. You would agree. Every day, the dedicated men and women of the FAA guide thousands of aircrafts. Yet the FAA ATC's operations are currently mirrored within a federal bureaucracy that hinders innovative operations. That was issued in 2007. Nothing got done. Why should we think it's going to be any different this time?
President Trump had a lot of successes in his first term. This is an issue that we are addressing now. He was certainly focused on working with a Congress that was actually working against him and his agenda to secure the border. Even with that opposition, with a Republican majority in his first 2 years, he still was able to successfully build that a huge portion of that border wall and bring security there, get our economy booming once again. Of course, we all know what happened in 2020, but Joe Biden came in and he really declared an all-out war on our energy independence and completely did away
we may
with
be
that.
getting a little bit
ended construction at the southern border. Oh no, there's a lot here that
we're talking about ATC.
I'm going to come right back to it.
Okay.
No, but there is a lot of successes that President Trump had, and you can't just point to ATC and say that he did nothing.
Okay.
Joe Biden created this massive mess, and President Trump has to go into every single agency, every single program of the federal government and fix the messes that were created. And this is something that he is not ignoring. Secretary Duffy is not ignoring. And
Congressman,
we are
I think you made your point.
Provide solutions.
This is 2023, another tweet from you. America's the greatest country in the world. This is completely unacceptable. Air travel has become a nightmare lately. It's getting worse than ever before. What is Pete doing, and how has he not been replaced yet? Very fair questions at the time. Does that mean that if in a year or two we're still having these massive meltdowns, it'd be fair to fire Secretary Duffy?
Well, let's see where that goes. He's been here for even less time than President Trump has. He didn't get confirmed on January 20th. So you can't take something from 2023 or even 2024 and put that on Secretary Duffy. He got in, and immediately there was a horrible situation right here in D.C. I mean, that was completely devastating. And that was immediately after he was sworn in and took his oath of office for this job. And so he has hit the ground running, unfortunately, in a very devastating way in just his first few hours there. But he has, it's not like that he has been absent or trying to play political games.
I think you made a very good point.
So it's been a few weeks,
he handled,
and we'll see where he goes this year.
The way he handled the crash and the way President Trump handled the crash was a masterclass in crisis management and communications. So things are different. I think you'd agree with that. Do you approve or disapprove of the way Donald Trump is handling his job as president? It is now 52-42. This is the latest Economist YouGov poll. Without trashing the polling, the feeling of disorder in America with tariffs, now with the aviation system, that's something we take for granted. Now, I think you would classify in chaos or something close to that. Do you worry that maybe things that are not necessarily President Trump's fault, tariffs are though, are going to become his problems?
So first of all, a 90-second delay is not complete chaos. That was not nationwide. It was specific to one airport. So I would not classify that as chaos. Is it bad? Absolutely. Do we care about the safety of Americans? Yes, that is paramount. And I won't trash your polling, but I will say that I poll my constituents in Colorado on a regular basis, and I have folks that are very pleased with President Trump, as am I. Even our farmers are understanding of the tariffs that are taking place. Our ranchers, our hardworking Americans who keep us fed and keep those around the world fed even, they are happy with the tariffs, and they understand that they are reciprocal and that this is a businessman doing business and creating leverage and having negotiation with the world. We've been taken advantage of. So I would say President Trump is doing a phenomenal job. He's doing exactly what he promised that he was doing. It's not what he was going to do. It's not a surprise that he brought tariffs. He campaigned
He said he
on
would. He said he would, and he's brought them. Congresswoman, it's always good to see you. Thank you from a state you and I both love, of Colorado. It's good to see you. Next time in studio. First wrote about this in War Notes.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Congresswoman should subscribe to War Notes too. WarNotes.com. Your chance for an inside look at the show every day. It is free. You will be delighted and smarter when you check your email at 7:05 p.m. It is the same common sense, unflinching analysis we deliver every day on the show in your email inbox. 180 days into the Trump presidency. Make that 106 days into the Trump presidency. Gas prices are down, the stock market is steady, and there is no empty grocery shelves. But Democrats are still screaming about being on the brink of a recession. So who's right? All right, back now with breaking news. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and the Trade Representative Jameson Greer will meet with the Chinese officials who negotiate trade things in Switzerland to begin talks between the United States and China. This will be the first conversation between the U.S. and China since Liberation Day, a.k.a. the day President Trump announced tariffs on the world. And since then, we've heard nonstop screaming about Americans losing everything. Gone is a good economy, job stability, your 401ks were all disappearing before our eyes for the past month. But sometimes a media narrative comes at odds with reality. So just take a look. Since April 2nd, the stock market is basically unchanged. The S&P 500 saw its longest winning streak in over 20 years last Friday. With us now, Democratic New York Congressman Joe Morelle, member of the Appropriations Committee, seen today in the hearings. Good to see you, sir.
Nice to see you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Pleasure. Maybe this is too harsh of a question, so forgive me if it is. Are Democrats rooting for a recession?
No, I don't believe so at all.
Okay.
I mean, look, I think we care deeply about American families, and you can't care about American families if you're rooting for an economic downturn simply to score political points. So I don't believe that. I think they're legitimately concerned about the direction we're headed in, and certainly not what's happening today, although we're concerned about what's happening, but we're concerned about what is the economy going to be like in 2 months, 3 months, 5 months, and what impact do the tariffs, if they go through, what impact do they have?
Okay. I think a pretty reasoned response. Democrats worried about the economy. According to DDHQ, our polling partners, 82% are concerned about a recession. The U.S. consumer drives the U.S. economy. Agreed?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously that drives part of the economy.
Is all this talk, is all this worry, is all the hand-wringing over Donald Trump's tariffs run the risk of talking us into a recession?
No, I don't think that. I think the tariffs are a real thing. It's not as though they're imagined. And the impact of tariffs, particularly because they are a tax on goods that come into the United States that consumers buy. I think sometimes people use words to try to confuse the situation, but this does add a burden to American consumers. Now, the question is long-term whether that leads to the kind of investment in American supply chain and American products that the president hopes for. I think many of us, and I think many Republicans, have real concerns. And if you look historically, tariffs, particularly broad-based tariffs, as we're seeing here, have not
You
typically
seem oddly sanguine about this. as opposed to the hair on fire response from a lot of Democrats. Got you to chuckle with that. Why is that?
Well, because I think this is an unfolding story. This is what I also believe. If you look at what the president's done over the last 100 days plus, he has offered tariffs, pulled back, advanced them, pulled back. We're now on the clock, 90 days, and we're down to probably about 70, maybe even fewer, where you're supposed to have deals with 154 countries. My guess is he's going to pull back again, because I think he's got to know that when you do this on a unilateral basis, when you make these decisions sort of in the peak of the moment when you're angry or when you have a personal grievance, that's going to lead to bigger costs. And I think he started to acknowledge that over the weekend. I mean, he talked about buying $2 or $3 instead of $30. Talked about instead of having 250 pencils to have 5.
I think he uses Sharpies. I don't know why he was talking about pencils. Oh, the Sharpie is where it's at.
I think the Sharpies will definitely go up in price. So I think from a real point of view, I think American families are anxious. I've talked to a lot of business leaders. I'm somebody who works very hard in the Rochester community. We have manufacturers who are very concerned about the lack of predictability.
Yeah, and we've seen a lot of manufacturers, though, who are excited.
Yeah, but I mean, some. But I think on balance, if you talk to them off the record without being, I think they would say the lack of predictability and the chaos makes it very difficult for them to invest resources, right? And you're looking, by the way, you don't announce a factory and stand it up in 30 days. These take years to do, typically.
True. That's
so
true.
I think many of them are withholding judgments on what to do. And if this leads to, as I suspect it may, to increase prices, reduced. I mean, you know, first of all, if he had 40 or 50 deals, I'm sure he'd be announcing them. He wouldn't be. This is what Donald Trump does. And he should be leery of the fact that he keeps saying, and I heard the Commerce Secretary say the same thing the other day, which is, we're the biggest market, we're the consumer, everybody has to come here. It's true, we're a big market, but we're not the only market in the world. You got Europe, you got countries in the Pacific. I would be very, very concerned if I were him, and that's why I think he'll back off on these trade deals.
Or back off on the tariffs.
Yeah, right.
So, well, I remember, and just to pull this back to this sort of concept of recession, back in 2022, when it was clear the economy was in really rough shape under President Biden, the inflation numbers were through the roof. People were complaining about high prices. Democrats almost wouldn't acknowledge the economic pain that people were going through. No, we were told the economy is doing great. Do Democrats lack credibility on this?
Well, I think, look, I think what's become the modern world is when you're the party out of power, you attack the other side. I think there's real concern here, though. I hear it from constituents without regard to whether Democrats or Republicans.
Well, yeah, also, if the other guys are doing bad, then you don't have to offer anything new, right?
Well, that may be the case, but I don't think we can leave it there. I mean, we've got to talk about our vision for making sure we're continuing to build supply chain and jobs here, bring manufacturing back. That's why we did the CHIPS and Science Act, which was bipartisan, to start to build a secure supply chain that's good, not only for economic purposes, but for national security purposes as well. And look, the way we are treating our allies right now, if you come from where I do, Rochester, New York, my county alone, $750 million of exports just to Canada, and now that is highly in question. And we see Canadians just over the border who come to spend summers in upstate New York canceling those vacations. We've seen a real impact here. And those are allies. I mean, what I've talked about, I was in Korea and Japan 2 weeks ago with a Republican colleague. And they're saying, is American leadership going to leave us here? Are we going to be alone? How does this work in a world where we think we're friends? And yes, we do trading, and we want to continue to have global trade. And with our allies and partners between Europe and the Pacific Rim in the United States and Canada, there are a lot of friends and allies who we are now certainly causing them to question our judgment.
I think that's fair. There is a lot of concern around the world on that and at home. It's good to see you, Congressman.
Nice to spend time with you.
Yeah,
thank you.
You as well. Breaking news that we're following tonight overseas, almost what the Congressman was talking about. 6 in the morning right now in Pakistan, where Pakistan claims to have just shot down 2 Indian fighter jets. Whether that actually happened or not, we don't know. But what we do know is that India launched missiles across the border into Pakistan. At least 3 civilians, again, according to the Pakistanis, died. And 3 civilians died in India when Pakistan retaliated. This is some of the aftermath in Pakistan-administered Kashmir. That's the disputed land between the 2 countries. So why does any of this matter, little skirmishes in this mountainous region between India and Pakistan? It's very simple. because a war between the two of them would be the first time two nuclear-armed nations have engaged in direct conflict. It does not take long for this to escalate. And it already has, the conflict on this border, just days before Donald Trump heads to the Middle East.
No, it's a shame. We just heard about it just as we were walking in the doors of the Oval. Just heard about it. I guess people knew something was going to happen based on a little bit of the past. They've been fighting for a long time. You know, they've been fighting for many, many decades and centuries, actually, if you really think about it. No, I just hope it ends very quickly.
Well, right now, it's not ending, it's escalating. India reportedly struck 9 sites, killing at least 8 people. Initial assessments show military sites were not hit, but Pakistan is and has vowed to retaliate. That leads to an all-out war. Tonight, major airlines are avoiding Pakistani airspace in the event of retaliatory strikes. You can see that big open area right now on your screen. That's as planes are flying around so they don't get hit with surface-to-air missiles. India says the strikes were in response to a deadly terror attack in Kashmir a month ago. More than 26 people died then. So let's put this in perspective and why this is so important to you at home. This is just the latest foreign policy crisis for the Trump administration to juggle. They have got Ukraine, they have got Taiwan, they have got Iran, they have got North Korea, and now what nobody had on their 2025 bingo card, India and Pakistan. And China loves this. If this escalates, or maybe I should say when it does, it is going to focus attention on the Trump administration about who will be the adult in the room to move the chess pieces. And there is going to be a lot of focus on Donald Trump going forward. Trump loves to talk about his best friend, the Indian Prime Minister, and perhaps some questions about whether he needs to pick up the phone and call him quickly. A new report puts John Fetterman's health back into a damning light. And now the very people who used to defend Fetterman want him to resign. We're going to expose why they want to do that now, and they've changed their mind, and guess what? It has nothing to do with health. Remember just a few years ago, it seemed like yesterday to me, John Fetterman of Pennsylvania, well, he had some serious health problems. And attacking John Fetterman of Pennsylvania was ableist. I should know. People attacked me for talking about his health issues. Talking about his hospitalization for depression risked hurting strides made in mental health awareness. Questioning the fitness of a man who had trouble forming sentences after a stroke was not allowed. You were ableist. It's terrible. But now the long knives are out from the very same people who defended him. An article released by New York Magazine, doesn't get more liberal than that, details a letter written by Fetterman's former chief of staff, titled All by Himself, and this is from author Ben Terrace. A 1,600-word email came with the subject concerns, and it contained a list of them, from the seemingly mundane, he eats fast food multiple times a day, to the scary, we do not know if he is taking his meds, and his behavior frequently suggests he is not. Now, back in the day, you were not allowed to ask John Fetterman about his meds or anything. You were just only supposed to celebrate him getting out of the hospital and doing better and seeking help. That was all that was allowed. But now CNN is very interested. They chased him down, and Fetterman answered some questions about the article.
It's a one-source hit piece, and it involved maybe 2 or 3 anonymous disgruntled staffers saying just absolute false things. Have you been keeping up with that, taking your medication? I want to, my doctors are like, John is great.
With us now, Charlie Dent, senior advisor for Our Republican Legacy, former Pennsylvania congressman, and John Michael Roche, political reporter for the Daily Mail. Big exclusive out today on this. So I want to start with you. Beyond these accusations, if you will, were you guys able to substantiate that there are any real problems with Fetterman?
So I talked to a couple sources that work in the same building as him, that see him often. And they told me that, one, they haven't seen his wife around recently. And she's formerly been around with him a lot during his health struggles, namely his stroke in 2022.
Yeah, when he was in the hospital, she was down all the time and everything else.
Exactly. But they've also said that they've seen him wandering the halls, you know, kind of taking some breaks during the day, going outside, getting some sun, chilling on his phone. And some of these staffers have told me it's kind of odd to see a senator, normally whose schedules are bustling, right, to the brim, they can't fit people in, to see him go and sit and enjoy the nice air outside while everyone else is around.
I mean, to be fair, he's been known to march to a different drummer a lot. I mean, this is a guy who sort of does what he wants and wanders around in a hoodie anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, there's no inference that he's walking out like a zombie, is there?
So in my conversations with him, I can talk about that. He seems okay, but he still has to use his iPhone every time he interfaces with anybody, right? So you're trying to ask him a question just about whatever casual topic of the day, and he has to stop, pull out his phone, and have kind of that dictate the conversation.
Right, and he's gotten better with that. There was a time he was having a really hard time after his stroke. Now he's gotten better, but the way this is being talked about has changed radically, right? And I think about, for example, Mehdi Hassan, longtime progressive activist. This is in 2022. Imagine being a sentient human being who really believes John Fetterman can't be a senator because he had a stroke, but a stroke-free Herschel Walker can be a senator. And you were not allowed to attack him for using his iPad. In fact, it was sort of celebrated that this is a guy who was overcoming all these things. This is from Mehdi Hassan earlier today. This email a year ago from Fetterman's former chief of staff and his entire piece from Ben Terrace makes clear that Fetterman should not be serving in the Senate. Charlie, I don't think it's a surprise that people radically change their opinions and have no shame with the hypocrisy. Why has the left turned on Fetterman so much?
Well, in part because John Fetterman has evolved from a Bernie Sanders progressive Democrat to something else, one who, has taken a very strong pro-Israel stand with a party's base that isn't there. Also, he went down to Mar-a-Lago. So I think partly because he is seen as shifting politically. But I also think, we have to be careful and sensitive how we talk about his health. He got, when he had that massive stroke, you may remember during that campaign, his campaign was accused of not fully revealing the extent of his disability.
I was at the debate where he couldn't finish a sentence.
It was, I said at the time of the debate, that was a disqualifying performance. And then, of course, all the ableist comments came out. And then, of course, after he was elected, he had that bout of clinical depression, was hospitalized for a time. And now it's his former chief of staff who has set off this latest kerfuffle. But I think his bigger problem is it's a political challenge. He's underwater significantly with Democrats. I mean, the Bravo group, their morning scrapple poll, they do it monthly in Pennsylvania. It says he has 25% of Democrats have strongly disapprove of him, about 30% somewhat disapprove. So he's underwater with Democrats, and he's about even with Republicans, but that's soft support. So I think he's in a real political box right now.
John Michael Rosh of the Daily Mail. Have you guys done any reporting on this wild flip from the same liberals who were saying anyone who questions his health was an ableist to now saying he needs to resign?
So we've talked to some folks, namely in the Senate, trying to say, what do you think about his political aspirations kind of flipping? Obviously, his support of Israel has been, all over the news, and that separated him from a lot of people in his party. And folks that are in the Senate, the Democratic caucus, are separating themselves from him over this support. So we've done some reporting on that, and also just trying to look at his evolution, right? You were saying he was more of a progressive Bernie Sanders type when he ran. I covered that campaign. He was bringing in people, straight from the union factories out in Braddock, straight to his campaign events. And he was really, singing the tunes of a true progressive. Now it's like he's, a moderate, centrist Democrat getting close to the Republicans every day. So he's totally singing a new tune. And his colleagues seem to be
they do. So I think it's worth playing just to understand this arc. Some of the new demands he resigns based on this one letter. So Crystal Ball and Glenn Greenwald now suddenly wanting him to resign says a lot after his support of Israel. Charlie, how many Democrats do you think are worried he's going to flip to be a Republican?
Oh, I don't think that's likely. I really don't. I've heard that before. I think they're more concerned about his change in policy positions.
They're angry.
They're angry, but it's also reflected in, like I just mentioned, in his polling in Pennsylvania. I mean, he is upside down with Democrats, 25% strongly disapproving of him. You know, it's like 55 disapproved, 39 approved, just among Pennsylvania Democrats. That is his big problem right now.
Well, it's not really a problem. He's not running up for re-election.
It's a real political problem, and of course, he's got, apparently, based on these comments, there are some problems perhaps with some of his colleagues who don't like his evolution.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But we're trying to talk about this sensitively. I don't know anything about his health. I don't know what he's doing with his doctors.
Yeah.
But it's clear, though, that, like I said, though, it feels like maybe they need to reveal more about what he's doing with his health based on what his former chief of staff revealed to the New York Times.
They have an axe to grind. Good to see you, as always. Thank you very much. Keep up the great reporting, my friend.
Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you here. Canada's Prime Minister comes to Washington and tells Trump that his country is not for sale. Ahead, a Canadian who wants to keep the dream of becoming an American alive.
It would really be a wonderful marriage because it's two places that get along very well. They like each other a lot.
Back with breaking news now. It's official. At the end of the big meeting, Canada is not America's 51st state. The Canadian Prime Minister met with President Trump today, and much to Mr. Trump's dismay, the Canadian leader did not surrender his country to America. But that did not stop Trump from making his pitch in the Oval Office.
Somebody drew that line many years ago with like a ruler, just a straight line right across the top of the country. When you look at that beautiful formation when it's together, I'm a very artistic person, but when I looked at that beauty, I said that's the way it was meant to be.
Having met with the owners of Canada over the course of the campaign last several months, it's not for sale, won't be for sale ever.
Never say never. Never say never.
We welcome back Ryan Hemsley, advocate for Canada becoming the 51st state. Are you disappointed?
Nope, this is the beginning of a long journey ahead. And funny enough, actually, if it was the conservative leader, Pierre Poilievre, who was elected, the 51st state argument would have died amongst Canadian conservatives. We would have had no leg to stand on. Funny enough, actually, the 51st state, they elected Carney to fight against Trump, and he was the guy who was going to stand up for Canada. Trump spoke for 25 minutes. Carney spoke for 3. So he didn't do a heck of a lot of defending Canada, in my opinion. But no, this is the beginning of a long journey. It's going to be a little while, but I still have faith. And Trump knows what he's talking about based on the relationship he has with Carney already, Brookfield's relationship with Jared Kushner. There's a little bit of leeway that I think that Trump has with how he deals with him.
I sense this sort of idea of a long twilight struggle. You very rightly bring up the conservative candidate. There was just an election in Canada that the conservatives were going to win running away. And then Donald Trump started talking about Canada being the 51st state. The liberals said, we are going to stand up. Carney said, I'm going to stand up to Donald Trump. And then he won, not in a landslide, but by a pretty sizable margin. And Trump alluded to that. Take a listen.
Just a few days ago, he won a very big election in Canada. And I think I was probably the greatest thing that happened to him, but I can't take vote credit. His party was losing by a lot, and he ended up winning. So I really want to congratulate him. It was probably one of the greatest comebacks in the history of politics.
Did Trump completely roll over on you guys?
Well, Trump did certainly play a massive key role in Mark Carney getting elected. Every single liberal in this country truly believed that for some reason, our conservative leader would hand over the keys instantly. And so they elected Mark Carney. Mark Carney's the one with the relationship with Trump. Mark Carney's the one who sold out Canadians by moving Brookfield down to the United States for tax avoidance purposes. Mark Carney is the man who is definitely going to bring us closer to Trump. The selfish part of me knew that Mark Carney would bring me closer to the 51st state. Though, as a conservative, I voted conservative.
Hold on. How's that going to work? Because I think that we can all agree that if the 82nd Airborne landed in Canada to take over, that wouldn't go over well.
With who?
With Canadians.
Because there's a lot of people, ask people in Saskatchewan, in Alberta. Ask most of Western Canada, outside of a few very liberal cities like Vancouver and Victoria. The entirety of Western Canada, I mean, Alberta right now, Premier Danielle Smith just lowered the threshold for referendum counts, sent out a 20-minute video yesterday saying that if Ottawa doesn't get its you-know-what together, they're going to hold a referendum vote on separation in 2026. So it depends who you ask. If you ask people in Toronto, Vancouver, or Victoria, sure, ask everybody else. So it's one of those things, yeah.
This seems to be, I love the fight that you have. I'm not sure you guys have a chance.
I'm not giving up on it, man.
No, well, you know, it's interesting. The president's team is saying that this is some form of 4D chess, right? And that, you know, Carney played gracious, and then Trump sort of was very nice and opened the door, and we'll see what happens. All right, I love this. Ryan, we're going to check in with you, our favorite Canadian, the On Balance resident Canadian correspondent. Mark, it's good to see you. Well, Mark was here. You're Ryan. Thank you, Ryan. Good to see you. One thing you're going to be talking about tomorrow when we come back. What's J.D. Vance going to do? We'll see you in a minute. A quick correction before we go. Want to make it in this show. Ryan Hemsley, who was on just a few minutes ago, is not my actual favorite Canadian, because I forgot that my true favorite Canadian comes on right now. Here's Ashley.